Hey guys, Adam here. Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. We are going to start the actual endeavor of colonizing the Mun. And to do that, we're going to need fuel. I'm still using Kethane. This is kind of like out of vogue, I guess. It seems like a lot of people are using, what's it called? Kerbamite? I don't remember what they call it. There's a newer version that people seem to be using. I don't see as many people using Kethane anymore. I still really like it, but um, I'm going to be stuck in version 0.23.5 until this series ends, which will either be when I've explored all the planets, or when the actual retail release of Kerbal Space Program happens. I don't know which one will be first. I know they just released the beta version 0.9 like the other day, which is a little bit disappointing to me just because usually when a game goes into beta, they kind of lock down the features and stuff and just work on ironing out the bugs. I hope that means that they're not going to stop working on the 64-bit version of the game, because I really would like that. The game's pretty hollow without mods, in my opinion, and having more of them is always good, but you run into memory problems. So we ended up not having the thrust-to-weight ratio that I thought we would. So I had to engage the main engines a little bit earlier than I wanted to help this booster stage out. It doesn't really matter because I believe this thing's going to have plenty of fuel by the time we get out there and everything, but it's kind of annoying, and it was a little bit scary just because I wasn't sure if this thing was going to make it out of the, even make it out of the atmosphere. It's a really awkward looking ship, as you can tell. It has a few issues that will prop up as we get through this, and need to be remedied in the future. So that's something to consider. I'm just transferring all the fuel out of this booster tank here so that we can ditch it as soon as possible. No sense hauling around that extra weight and all that. So here we are out at the Mun. We completed the orbit. I mean the transfer. We still got like 2,700 meters per second of delta V, which should be more than enough to land. I'm not real sure about taking off. It ended up working out, but I wasn't real sure about taking off because the delta V requirements obviously are going to be higher. Well, not so much higher, but the ship's going to weigh a lot more, so we're going to get less delta V out of the fuel that we have. But I wanted to just land right near the equator here. I don't want to have to deal with any inclination changes and stuff like that. So I pretty much just scanned and found the first deposit that I was happy with. We're going to have to make some adjustments on the way down because the terrain's kind of rough here. But get that started here, and it's still in the sunshine, so on the next orbit around we'll be able to actually hopefully land there. That was one of the flaws of this vessel too, is the lack of a reactor on board. I couldn't figure out at this time how to make one fit in a way that wouldn't make it too tall. It's already a little bit cumbersome and stuff, and I didn't want to make it taller than it already was, but basically it's limited to working in the sun because it takes a fair amount of electricity to drill the kethane and all that stuff. So it is what it is, though. So as we're coming down here, I noticed that there was like this canyon where my mouse cursor is there on the screen. So I was having MechJeb, I actually redirected it slightly. So hopefully we'll land in this crater over here. Craters are generally a pretty good place to land if you land in the center of them because they're usually relatively flat. That canyon obviously was not going to work out very well. Canyons are not so good. And there's probably a flat spot in the middle, but this thing is it's pretty heavy. And it's going to be even heavier once it has all this kethane on board that needs to be refined. It can't refine it itself. The idea is that this thing lands anywhere on the planet, mines, and then takes off again. Something I'm kind of rethinking for the future. But the idea is that a lot of our missions are not going to have the fuel to come back from other planets. So I want to have an infrastructure in place where I could, say Moho, for example, like land something on Moho, take off and refuel the ship so they can make it back. The reason I'm testing on the moon is just because I don't feel like waiting months for things to arrive out on Moho and find out they don't work. I want to get a system that works here, then adjust the delta V so that it will work wherever we go. Now, I didn't want to have a refinery on board this thing because it seems stupid to me to be landing a big heavy refinery and taking off with it. I just kind of wanted to bring what was necessary. It can't get the hugest amount of fuel, but it does get a decent amount, so it'll work out. I had to be a little creative with how I got those solar panels mounted. The future versions, of course, will have to work in a nuclear reactor of some sort so that it can operate regardless of the sun conditions and all that stuff. But you see here, it looks pretty flat. And these things are always kind of a little bit deceptive because there's really not that many really flat places on the Mun, as I've been discovering as I've been scouting to try to find a place to land a base. There's usually some sort of slope, which is somewhat irritating. I'm sure that there are perfectly flat places, but you can kind of see the hillside here already, even from this altitude. But this should be within the realm of what this thing can handle. I don't like these landing legs. They're from the Aces pack, I don't remember the name of it. They look pretty cool, but they wobble like crazy. They're not that strong. Like, I think the stock landing gear in the game is actually stronger, like the large landing gear, than these ones. I think these are kind of medium, and I'm kind of asking them to do a lot here. But I'm going to phase those out of all my craft, I think, too, because I've been trying to be a little bit more, I don't know, like tidy as far as how many parts I have in a certain category. I don't need as many landing legs as I have. I'll probably try to get rid of all the non-standard landing legs that I'm using for the most part to save memory, because memory is always an issue. You can see here, this thing really wants to flip over. I would have liked to have figured out a better way to put some landing gear on the outside to kind of give it outriggers and stuff, but it's already kind of ungainly and stuff as it is, and I was trying to keep it, like, reasonable looking, I guess is the word. So now that we're down safely, I did fold all the solar panels up because I didn't want anything to get damaged while we were coming down here. So we'll go ahead and I actually did set this to an action group, which I usually don't even do, but get everything deployed here, and we'll start doing our drilling. See what we can actually come up with here. The detector said there was methane here, but you never really know until you get the drilling that you landed in the exact right space. But you see the green mist starting there, so we are good to go. It's going to take a little while to fill this puppy up, so I'll just go ahead and flash forward and do that. It is ridiculous looking with those solar panels coming off the top there. I don't like that. I probably should have put those on the side so it would stick out. I don't like how this thing looks. Rework is necessary, but at least we got something that actually functions. This is the first time I think I've ever mined methane in my life. So yeah, you see here, now that we I had time acceleration going while it was fueling up, and those landing legs, when they got out of time acceleration and the weight was higher, they started wobbling and clipping through the ground and all that stuff, so that wasn't good. But I believe we have just about enough delta V to make orbit and hopefully rendezvous with a future space station, which hasn't been constructed yet. I'm going to actually keep it separate from my main space station, around the Mun, because I do not want the lag that's going to be required for like all the refining and stuff to be any worse than it really needs to be, because there's a lot of parts on this, and this current space station I already have around the Mun has a lot of parts. That's going to be more of a ferry station where people going to the surface stop on their way. So once we get clear of these mountains, we pretty much just want to start burning towards the horizon, because that's the most efficient way to get into orbit with no atmosphere. Just want to make sure I had plenty of clearance, so I wasn't going to dip back down into the side of a mountain on the way up here. And we'll start burning off a little bit straighter here. So it seems like this thing is going to have, like I said, just about enough fuel to get up. The rendezvous is going to be a little bit on the dicey side, but I suppose we'll see that in the future, because I don't have the space station constructed. This is going to be parked in orbit. I didn't want to leave it on the surface, because sometimes things that you leave on the surface, if they weigh a lot, tend to kind of pop through the surface and stuff. But here we are circularizing the burn off, and this thing is just gonna go to sleep for a little while. We get a nice little earth rise, or Kerbal rise rather, going on there, which is always pretty. I always like that, and yeah, it always cheers me up. So I think we're at this point pretty much done with this thing, because I don't feel like launching all the space station components quite yet. We are going to launch a space station component, but we haven't even finished the other Mun space station, so I didn't really want to get started on yet another space station project without finishing this. I like space stations a lot, pretty much the long and the short of it. So here we are back at Kerbal. We're launching what is going to be the reactor system and a couple of fuel cells for the, or fuel storage for the Mun station, so we can keep that thing up and running and all that. It does have solar panels, but I think I'm pretty much just going to make it standard practice to really just use the solar panels as a reserve power source, because I'm going to be doing antimatter containment on a lot of these stations. I am going to probably have a science lab, one of the interstellar science labs, which require like 5 megawatts of power to function. I'm going to have one of those probably on every one of these stations, because when Kerbals are there and like not do anything, I might as well put a couple of them in the science lab and generate some free science, you know? So I'll probably end up putting one of those on every station. And those do need a lot of power. Of course, the reactors don't have unlimited lifespans, but they last a pretty long time and all that. And these small ones aren't too much of a problem to deal with. So this gives you a view of what we're actually launching here. You can see that there's some monopropellant tanks and stuff up there. We're getting our transfer burn done now, so I'll pretty much just skip through this. But just wanted to give a little bit of a view of what it actually is that we're launching. There's just a transfer stage like usual. There's a couple fuel tanks and a reactor and so forth on board this thing. I think it has the life support systems actually for... I don't remember if this has a life support system. I can't really see in my little preview window here, but I think it has life support systems, meaning like the water recyclers and stuff for the space station as well on board. I'm just transferring fuel from the front to the back because it makes it easier to pilot and so forth, and we needed the fuel. So not going to quite have a topped off fuel tank on the station, unfortunately, but we'll get our transfer done here and head on out there. So here we are arriving out at the MUN station, just kind of approaching from the bottom here, getting our docking done. It's a little bit close to that spinning wheel, but it seems like it's under control. I did mount some what are going to be temporary RCS ports to the actual component of the space station for this one, because fuel tanks are pretty heavy and I found that it's easier to dock them, of course, if you have more balanced RCS. I don't like to leave RCS ports on my space stations. I basically never do it because really they're just wasted parts. I'm not going to ever use RCS on the space station. It's pretty much just going to be stationary. It's not like real life where we might have to do orbital corrections or anything like that. So it really doesn't need any sort of engines. So I don't bother because parts always matter. I'm kind of conscientious as I can be about parts. So now we're going to go ahead and send our Kerbonaut out to actually take advantage of the Kerbal attachment system here and remove some of that stuff. The reactor is also launched in a state of being turned off, so I want to go ahead and actually turn it on so it will, you know, provide electricity and all that good stuff for the space station. So he's just kind of making his little way over there. It's a little bit dicey because there is that fairing. I think he can kind of go through the fairing, but I didn't want to end up bouncing too hard into anything down here, so I'm just taking it easy. And I think the radioactive warning sign thing pretty much is exactly where I want to go to turn this on, which is kind of funny. But get that thing fired up and start getting that delicious electricity going. And I actually thought of this ahead of time. I put a Kerbal attachment system container on the ship that's going to crash into the MUN, the booster stage that brought this out here, so that we can you know, have somewhere to put these RCS ports. I could have just stuck them onto the side of the other ship, I guess, but it's going to be using its RCS to actually get down because I transferred all the liquid and oxidizer fuels off of it, so it's going to be using RCS strictly to get down. So I didn't want to have unbalanced RCS when I was trying to deorbit this thing. So it's pretty neat. Just go pick that thing up, and like I said, I'm being gingerly here at first just because I don't want to crash into solar panels or anything like that. And I'm kind of enjoying... I like spacewalks. Really, the Kerbal attachment system I think is great just because it gives you an excuse to do a lot more spacewalks. Like, there's actually a point to them because you can attach things and whatnot. And I think that's way better. That really should be part of the game, doing like orbital construction stuff. And I was having trouble actually finding my little attachment container, but I see it now. That's why I was kind of like panning slowly around this thing because I was not sure where it was, but we found it. Go ahead and stow this stuff and it can go smash into the MUN now that its job is done, I suppose. And I'll be making greater use of the Kerbal attachment system in the future. The base that I'm going to be using is going to be using a lot of Kerbal attachment system stuff, and I actually have a mission that kind of depends on the Kerbal attachment system planned in the next, I don't know, few episodes. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to be, but It involves recovering some fuel and stuff like that from something. So Kerbal Attachment System's the easiest way to do that because docking on the actual Mun sucks. So we're back here on Kerbin. That guy's mission is complete and everything crashed on schedule back with the Mun. We're launching, at this point, a couple of little rovers. They're up there in the fairing. I had launched a sky crane in a previous, well, not really an episode because it didn't make it into the episode because the footage ended up being corrupted and all that stuff. But I have like an experimental sky crane kind of system that I'm hoping to be able to develop into a reusable ship for other planets as well, because you couple that with the kethane and you have like an infinite way to bring stuff down to the planet basically. Well, not really infinite, there is a finite amount of kethane, but you know, for practical purposes, as much as I'm going to do it, it'll be infinite. So there's just a couple of little rovers and a gantry pretty much on this thing. So this ship is designed to actually get out to the Mun and then dock with the sky crane. That was pretty, how those kind of twirled around. I like that. Anyway, I got all distracted there because the separations always are fun to me. But anyway, there's like a little gantry and stuff on this thing that's supposed to meet up with the sky crane, and then we'll land. And the sky crane is something that needs a lot of work as well. It's kind of like the kethane miner in that it has some serious issues. But you can see here, there's the rovers. The idea of the rovers is I want to send them down to scout a flat place to build a base somewhere. I was kind of hoping to build a base in the area where the kethane is, but I ended up kind of changing my mind later. But for now, I was thinking about doing that. So I do want to scout the location on the ground because it's really hard to tell from any of the maps, even the ScanSat map. I mean, that gives you some idea of the elevation and stuff, but it's hard to tell in detail exactly what the terrain is like. So I'm going to be sending rovers probably to every base site before we do it. Maybe not on, probably not on, what's it called, Minmus, just because it's so flat in the flats there. We don't really need to worry about that. But for the most part, I'll be sending rovers to scout stuff out because it's a lot easier to tell if it's somewhere that I would actually want to build a base and be landing all the time too. That's probably even a bigger deal than the flatness for the base. Just like, do I want to be landing ships here all the time, or are they going to always be in danger of tipping over? So you can see my sky crane. Like I said, it's a little bit well, it has some defects. I think there's a missing fuel line on it, so the fuel ends up getting out of balance. It has those yellow landing legs, which are not the greatest. It's a little bit too short, meaning that like the payloads have to be really short in order to fit, which is also a problem. So like there's a lot of revisions that probably should be done with this thing as well, and I'll keep developing it, I think. But for now, it is what we have, and this was a kind of like its testing phase here still. So I didn't really realize all those defects yet. But that's pretty with the Mun and the sun and the Kerbin behind there and everything. It's a nice view here. I'm appreciating that. So also I realized that docking really wasn't going to work out with this thing. So I ended up switching over to the other craft and docking using the sky crane because this thing was just kind of not functioning that well. Okay, so we're just kind of closing the distance here now. It's kind of neat looking with the surface of the Mun speeding by underneath of us and everything just kind of drifting all peacefully and nicely. But I just wanted to get this thing kind of close, and then we'll switch over to the sky crane and actually deal with that. I'm actually also considering having a manned version of the sky crane because I kind of realized that there are going to be times on other planets where there will not be good satellite coverage necessarily, so I'm considering putting a real cockpit on this thing so that a crew can come down. And also if I need to do any construction stuff, it'd be nice to have guys there. So I'm gonna have to rethink this system quite a bit. But if you've seen my previous series, this is sort of loosely based on the design that I used for that. I really still have not been able to get a good sky crane going. I resist using what's it called, Infernal Robotics, just because I already have enough parts and plugins and stuff, and I didn't want to add more for just a couple of really specific things. It seems like the sort of thing I should be able to make work without all the headaches of Infernal Robotics. There's always issues with Infernal Robotics too, so if I can avoid using it, I will. I would much rather make this work in a just purely mechanical way, I guess, rather than with another mod, because I have enough. And come on. There we go. Landing rovers is always an issue for me anyway. You have to use really some sort of sky crane because there's no ramps or anything where you could have the engine underneath and build like a little pod for them to come down. I guess that's where, you know, the, what's it called? Infernal Robotics would probably come in handy, but like in the stock game and most mods, there's really no good option for building some sort of a little landing ship and just driving the thing out of it. So it pretty much ends up coming down to using a sky crane, which is an awkward solution and all that, but it is what it is. We're just transferring whatever remnants of fuel there might be here, so just trying to keep this thing topped off, I guess. And in a moment, we'll go ahead and disconnect this. I'll crash the booster down into the surface, and we'll land the rovers. Alright, so you can kind of get an idea of what the final landing gantry thing is like here. I'll just show this real quick. Most of this stuff disconnects, the docking port and all that stuff on the bottom. This will all just, like I said, crash back down into the mud and be out of the way. So we got to select a landing site, and that means I need to find something that's kind of relatively, that looks cool. Anyway, like we found a landing site, something relatively flat. It's not the flattest. This is the large crater. I kind of wanted to check this out. I don't remember the name of this offhand, which crater this is. It's kind of the big one that faces Kerbin. I'd rather have a view of Kerbin for my base as well, just because it's kind of neat, but it is what it is. So you can see there's kind of like a little bit of weird oscillation going on with this thing too. There's definitely a missing fuel line on here, and I keep having to manually balance fuel again. I don't have the TAC fuel balancer. You can see it down there on the little thing that shows how much fuel my engines have. One of them has a lot more fuel for whatever reason, and we got a lag spike like crazy right there for some reason. That's always concerning, I guess, but hopefully it'll work out. There it goes. It's worked out. So yeah, that's something that we'll need to redesign this thing for on its own. I think this thing's going to have a date with the surface of the Mun at some point here, because it's definitely has a few shortcomings, to be sure. But the idea here is to, like I said, find a flat spot in this crater and try to check it out. Roving, of course, is pretty slow, but it's really the only way. You can do kind of like a general overview from orbit, but it's a little hard to tell really too much from orbit itself. It's pretty here. I like the landscape, but it's not flat. That much is kind of obvious right here. It's like not too terrible, I guess, where we're landing, but it's definitely not the best. And again, like I said, these yellow landing legs just have not worked out at all. They're very little. They look like the kind of like the Apollo lunar lander ones. That's kind of what they remind me of. I think they're just meant for like a light lander, and they just don't function all that well. They definitely do the jaggy, like going through the ground thing fairly often and all that stuff, which is not a good feature in a landing leg, to clip through the ground. I don't know why that happens, but it does. So you see here, it's pretty level, right exactly where we landed. It's not the best, but it'll do. This thing's not so top heavy and stuff, so it's not going to have so much of a problem tipping over or anything. So I wasn't as concerned about finding a perfect landing site for this. And you see, I realized the problem pretty much immediately here, which is that the rovers actually stick down slightly further than the legs do. So, like I said, we have really limited capacity here. I think the entire weight of the spacecraft right now is being supported by those rovers, which is a good thing that we're on the Mun, where the gravity is lesser, because that probably would break on Kerbin. But what I'm doing here is I decided to give a little bit of thrust and try to disconnect as we were thrusting up, just so that these things, we weren't quite like above them, you know, like super high up where they were going to fall. And then I cut the thrust too early, and we kind of partially crashed into one. But yeah, that didn't really work as well as I would have liked. Well, we got them undocked, and I just have to move this leg. It doesn't look like that rover's too broken, but I guess we'll see. So at least we have extra. This thing's wibbling and wobbling. At least we have extra landing leg capacity where we can fold one up on it, and it doesn't matter. And that decoupler's just kind of rolling away over there. It's kind of odd. Anywho, get these bad boys fired up here pretty much, and I think I realized at this point that I stupidly did not deploy the antennas on them, and that means there's no way to contact them, and this thing's unmanned. So I guess we're gonna have to send a manned mission down here to manually deploy those antennas and get these things rolling, because I was dumb, and there's not really much I can do about that, because what's done is done. So anyway, I think that's probably a great place to just leave it for today. So I will catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.